Thank you very much, and welcome to a slide deck that happened yesterday evening, night. This is a sort of interactive session, so if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt me. If you have really good questions, you can get one of those books. We have Puppet Types and Providers, 6 of those, and the new edition of ProPuppet. I was talking to the authors yesterday, and they're like, I'm going to be talking about types and providers. Here, have those books. Fine. So the idea behind this talk was I wanna learn more about Puppet, and turns out it's actually not that easy. So who here is a complete beginner? Okay, I hope I don't scare you completely away. So, short introductions. I'm Igor Galic, or Igor Galic, I don't know how you pronounce it, on GitHub and IRC. You can bug me. I'll merge your patches if you have any. HeroJin on Twitter. A word of warning, though. This is my pinned tweet. So I don't usually talk all that much about Puppet or anything. I just rant. Staying with the topic of introductions, how I got here. It's working. I thought it's going to be as funny as it is. I meant more like the technical side of things. So I started with programming in C. I learned that. I actually learned programming in C back in the day. I think it was 10 years ago. No, longer. Wow, it's a long time ago. C++, assembler. Like, I even learned Java. I didn't really program in Java. I just learned it. So hands up, like if you recognize any of those, if you've worked in those, please bring up your hands when I mention it, so I can have a feel for what you've been doing. I did PL1. Has anyone heard of that? Yeah. Yeah, I taught myself PHP and Ruby, but I haven't used it for a long time. I started working semi-professionally with Linux when I was like 17, I think. And yeah, then my first job was a reliability engineer, as Google has termed that, where I worked on Solaris systems. No Solaris people? Oh, 1, 2, 3, 4, well, there we go. We did deployments mostly of Java apps on JBoss and debugged them. The automation was, we had automation. No, really, but it was like house-grown, written in Java, and the backend was Bash that I wrote. So, yeah, I moved on from there. I did loads of open source before getting on the Puppet submarine. I'm a committer to Apache HTTPD and Traffic Server. Has anyone used those? Traffic Server, anyone? Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I even did make scripts to automate my infrastructure. Has anyone tried that? No? No one? There we go. It works. You know, it's a declarative language. So that's so much for introductions. And like I guess, yeah, not many people have done the obscure things that I did, but it's okay. You don't have to. Finally, Puppet. And Puppet was sort of a revelation. When I started doing Puppet, I got back into programming because I haven't done that for like 5 years maybe. It made me go back to programming and made me want to go back to programming. But the other thing is like how we all got here is that we like to take things apart, that we like to understand them, that we like to play with them, and sometimes, I guess, we break them and maybe repair them, but yeah. This is sort of the essence of this whole adventure here, and because I like to understand things, and I had this great idea. Let's try to do more types and providers, because everyone says you should be doing that. Now the problem with that is, and the reason why this talk exists, is that the image that the Puppet designers and sometimes accidental designers had in their mind when they were designing it isn't quite the same that you have when you're looking at Puppet code, or that you might have like this feeling that when you look at it and you think it should be like this, and then you look at the code underneath and it's not. This image, by the way, is from a book that I recommend everyone to read. It's called The Design of Everyday Things, and it's from Dan Norman. So if you've ever ran into a glass door, or if you had trouble opening a door, I highly recommend reading this book. You will find a soulmate. If you're working on any kind of design, like if you ever thought of yourself as an inventor, or if you're a programmer, or if you want to become a programmer, or if you're a sysadmin, or whatever, read this book. It's really, really good. Okay. The thing is, in order for design to be successful, the product itself has to communicate its intent to the user. And with some things, this is really, really obvious. Yes? It is. With software, it's not. And I think that we're failing Dijkstra, who said that the goal of computer science is to manage complexity. And I don't think we're there yet. I think Luke himself has said that we have so much more to do, so much more we can go. And simplicity is a virtue, but it's hard. Simple designs are really, really hard. So with that, let's get started. So, are you ready? Okay, good. So no more blah blah. Now it's. I actually thought of inserting another like cat picture or calming manatee before we get started, because from now on it's gonna get ugly. Okay, but it's a slow slope. Okay, so first of all, Puppet has classes. Who knows OOP, object-oriented programming? Okay, who knows that Puppet classes aren't like the same thing as like C++ classes? Okay, good, a few. So Puppet classes are actually just glorified containers, where in the classical object-oriented programming languages, you have classes that are cookie cutters, and objects are a certain instance produced by that cookie cutter. In Puppet, it's basically just a way to put things together. It's a namespace. It's a way of organizing things, of guaranteeing order. So, like, this would be a nice starting point for a module. This whole line could install, configure, and run OpenSSH on your servers, on all of your servers. Now, the problem is if you need to tweak something, we add parameters. And since Puppet free, we have Hera, and I have heard, I don't know how many pronunciations of that. I prefer Hera, so if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's up there. Hera is actually, it's not even orthogonal anymore. Like it's embedded into Puppet so far by now that it's it can be considered part of the system. So now when Puppet runs, it will automatically check in your Hera backend in some YAML files what you have as value for permit root login, and in my case, I prefer that to be false. And then I can't log in on the servers anymore because I forgot to install some libraries that allow my users to be created. Yeah, it happens all the time to me. Fortunately, it's just virtual servers, so it's not that bad. Okay, so with Hera in place, we can go back to this. And I'm a big fan of Hera because it allows me to teach people how our infrastructure works and how Puppet works separate from one another. Because I can show them Puppet code, and I can show them how our infrastructure implements the code. And I don't have to mix those metaphors. Like, I don't have to completely lead someone through like the obscure history of a company so that they understand why certain things are implemented that way. I can just show, okay, this is how a Puppet module works, and this is the way that we set up applications, and it's different. So another very, very powerful concept in Puppet are resources. Has anyone ever used that? Anyone walked through who has walked through the Puppet VM, the learning VM? Okay. So by now, I have in the past couple of months, I've read a few books. I highly recommend basically walk through your new hires, or if you want to learn Puppet, like walk through the learning VM and then read the book that I don't have here because Alessandro didn't have it printed out, but I have a couple of those. Read Extending Puppet because it's a very, very good book that shows how things currently look. So Puppet resources are basically a way of querying the system. You can have resources for users, software, mounts, everything that is discoverable on the system, everything that is tangible on the system can be put into a resource. And in the base system, we do that. Like we have a Puppet resource user, obviously, which is pretty much a core of the system. And it can be used and it can be queried. Sometimes, like I say tangible, what do I mean? I mean that I cannot switch between, there we go. Oh, that's gonna be tricky. So, Puppet resource. So mounts can be discovered. Mounts are easy to discover. What's not easy to discover? Even though there's like many and loads of them. What would be an example? Anyone? No, users are easy to discover. I can type user, and if we could see it, but if I typed it correctly, it should show up. All the users I have on the system.
IPv6 addresses.
I think there's a module for that, but we have a factor for that. That's a basic, that's a very, very low-level thing, and it's something that you want to know before you even before you start manipulating things.
Really?
Maybe. I don't know. I've been struggling with IPv6. I'm not going to say anything on IPv6. If someone has smart answers to IPv6, I'll give you a book. I'll give you 2 books if you fix it for me. But how about files? I mean, everything in Unix is a file, right? Oops. So this doesn't work. There's so many files on a Unix system that it doesn't make sense for Puppet to try and discover it. So in some cases, even though Puppet resource is very, very powerful and very useful and also very, very useful during development, it doesn't make sense. Try to keep those in mind for later when I show you examples and you start crying. Okay, So let's look at some differences. Who knows what a defined type is in Puppet? Okay, who can answer what a defined type is? Do we have a microphone? I don't want to keep speaking all the time. Who wants to answer what a defined type is? Oh, you look like you want to go back and forth to people. Who wants to win a book? 6 books. I don't want to carry those back. Those are heavy, seriously. I'm giving those out. If you're asking questions, if you're answering questions. Okay. So a defined type is a type that you define in the Puppet DSL. And it has almost the same properties as the types that are already hard-coded into the Puppet core. I mean, we have some obscure stuff in there, right? We can manage ZFS and we can manage Nagios. And yesterday was announced that we are ripping some of those things out and putting them in modules where they belong. But some of those things cannot be managed. A defined type cannot access the REL, the resource abstraction layer, what I just showed you. And this is kind of sad, right? It would be nice if we could do that, and maybe with Puppet 4 or Puppet 5, we will be able to do that. So, also, I've tried to, in broad strokes, show what the differences are. Like in the DSL, when you implement different behaviors on different platforms, you would either do that with branching, or maybe in a subtype that is private. So it's not your public API. You would write it in such a way that when you were to publish that module, you want to be able to change that without making breaking changes to the public API. Okay. So let's look at the first module that I have published. I told you I work on Apache Traffic Server. This is too much code to fit on this slide. I worked on Apache Traffic Server. This is one of the many defined types that I published in this first module of mine. Can anyone tell me what's wrong here? Or difficult to work with, maybe? Sorry? Almost. No, this is coming from the module. So traffic server sysconfig is a reference to the module. So that's okay actually in that case. Okay, let's go on. Just a couple more lines here.
Well, for me, the AUGEAS, looking at that, I have no idea what that is. It's not descriptive.
Okay, yeah. So AUGEAS, or however that's pronounced, who can pronounce this? Wonderful. Okay, thank you. AUGEAS. I pronounce it the same, but some people pronounce it English. I don't know how to do that. I'm not English. AUGEAS is a very, very powerful tool that's also in the core of Puppet, and you can use it to manipulate things. But the problem with that is, what does it do and how does it work? I have no idea, and neither have you. But the funny thing is, I require you to pass things directly down into AUGEAS, whatever. And that's bad. Why is that bad? It's a bad design choice. It requires you to have intimate knowledge of how that thing works, and you don't. What you maybe have is intimate knowledge of how traffic server works. So in that case, you would say, this is the port I want to listen on, and that's it. You don't want to think about how to express that in AUGEAS. So a short word on symmetry. When we go back and forth here, Who knows what exported resources are? Who wants to tell us what exported resources are? By the way, you get a book.
Can I get the other one?
Oh,
Are
yes.
there
you
a
have-
resource that can be defined on one node and can be exported to a common database, and other nodes can pull in those resources and instantiate them?
Repeat slowly. Don't be nervous.
How?
Huh?
How?
Repeat slowly.
I'm confused. But an exported resource is a resource that is defined in one catalog or one catalog compilation, but is not instantiated in that catalog. Instead, it is exported to a common database, and other nodes can, during their compilation, instantiate these resources.
Okay,
So you export the resource from one machine to another.
cool. Do you want a book? Okay. I just put this in there because I'm a big fan of Symmetry, even though Symmetry doesn't always, sometimes it's lies. So you think, like, okay, those two concepts, they look very much alike, but like in the core, they sometimes aren't. But what I'm trying to get at here is, like, when you look at the top there, this is your defined type. This is the contract. And this is the same thing that you export. Like, you only export to the contract. So a node that exports a resource does not have to know how it's implemented. And this is a very important concept also in Puppet. This is why we separate types and providers, because the type is the contract, okay? And the provider is how it's executed on the target. So keep that in mind, let it sink in before we move on to look at the type. Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So this is my re-implementation of traffic server config record. In this case, it's just traffic server _ record. So we have a nice description that says this is a type that manages cut-off things. And then we have a parameter that's called record, and this parameter is the name var. So this is the thing that is like your most important variable in there. That's your identifier. Yeah, this is the title or the name. Of course, you can. No, sorry. Sorry. It's the name. The title is something else. They're not the same. And then we have the value, and that is it. That is the contract. So this is the contract that we have now defined. So this is, if we go back here, I have redesigned this to match, to more closely match what traffic server itself looks like, or thinks it would look like, and have implemented it in this form. Who's scared? Okay, why? It's all new, yeah. It was scary. Here's a calming melody. Okay, so let's look at code. Okay. I'm going to keep the calming manatee in the background. I think that's important. It's getting warm in here. Okay, so first of all, who has ever dared to look at the Puppet code? I did a couple of times. I talked about symmetries and how important they are. So if we look at lib here, this mirrors the exact same structure that Puppet lib looks like. In this case, we only implement Ogeas and Puppet. I hope that I'm going to be getting rid of Ogeas after this week. And then we have types and providers. We've already looked at the type of what traffic server record looks like. Now we're going to look at the provider, how it's implemented. Now remember, in the defined type, both are in the same file. One of them is in round parents, defining the contract. The other one in the curly ones, defining how it is going to be executed. So now we are going to look at the Ruby code of traffic server record. And this looks a little bit off. Okay. So again, I put a description in there. And in this case, I am using a command. So it's nice that traffic server has its own command line tool to manipulate its own configuration, so I can directly use that. Many tools have that, like PuppetConf, for instance, has that. Is that Post? Yes, it's PuppetConf. So we're going to be using that tool. And like I said before with the Puppet resource, traffic line can give us all the parameters that records config currently has. So we're going to use that because it's valuable, and we're going to query all of them at once. And this is what we do here in this method. It's called self-instances, and we get all the values out. And then, if we try to set a value, we can simply do this in a method called value equals. So in Ruby, you can append a number, like you can have methods with all kinds of names, all of Unicode. So an equals method at the end of a name means use this method for assignment. And in this case, it's very simple. I hope it's simple. Who can tell me what this does? The value equals method. No hands up. There we go.
Is it making a name value pair there, where it reads from the resource and populates in that hash map?
So what we're doing is we're basically we're getting the current value that has been passed into it, and we put it into options. And then we directly execute traffic line with those options to set the value for us. Who's confused? I was too. And up here, we basically do the same for name. Like we get a value in, and we set it into this very special property hash. That's a special hash that you use to populate all your objects, as we can see down here. Only in comments in this case, though. We query all the objects, and then we just return new, this is my name, and this is my value, and it automatically populates that hash at the very beginning. Like when you run Puppet resource traffic line, traffic record, it would do that automatically for you. Okay, so, and this is actually it. It's just, how many lines of code? I have no idea. Loads of comments because the scaling is wrong. Okay. Questions? Who wants a book? Do you want a book?
I'd have no idea where to even start, like copying that and go, oh, I'll make my own stuff. I can't even debug Can I put in some put-s statements to debug and show what some of those values that get magically assigned set? There's nothing that I can't even comprehend what to start, where to start.
Yeah, I think I started at a similar level, and it was not, I think, until 2 months ago that Ashley Penny, who now unfortunately does no longer work for Puppet Labs, like gave me a magic token word, and that word is pry. So Ruby has a something that is called REPL. So read, evaluate, loop. So you like read something in, it loops around, and you can try things out. The standard one is called IRB, but pry is like it is just magic. You install pry and you put somewhere in here like a call to pry, and when you're confused or when something breaks, it lands you in, and you can start exploring. And this is basically how I have managed to like fake my way all the way to this podium. Yeah, I'd actually like to demonstrate that because it's probably much less confusing than the other things I have on these slides. Go ahead.
So we've heard a lot today about the resources that are available to not only beginners but intermediate and experienced Puppet coders, the Puppet Forge, the Puppet community, obviously the Learning VM.
Mm-hmm.
Based on your personal experience, outside of those options, what would you say are some of the best resources to actually begin building your own modules and implementing Puppet into an infrastructure?
I think I've already said probably the best book that currently summarizes everything that's going on is Extending Puppet by the Example 42 author, Alessandro. This is really a pretty much complete overview that you have over the landscape right now. I would absolutely recommend that for maybe even people who are experienced with Puppet, because every night that I've read that book, I've emailed people 2 or 3 links. I emailed my team 2 or 3 links from that book that I didn't know yet. So I absolutely recommend that one. Gary Larizza's blog, it's called Shit Gary Larizza Says. I have it at the end of, I have a couple of resources at the end. And I think, what else? Adrian Thiebaud has also a blog that goes very, very deep into Puppet. If you want to develop types and providers, I definitely recommend reading his reading of Puppet. It's literally called Reading Puppet, and he explains how certain things work. Okay, we can see, I think it would be nice to see this in action, like how this goes back and forth. So I'm gonna add pry calls to these things, and then we can leave the calming manatee in the background, because that's very important when we start trying to explore how this whole thing works together. Okay? So I'm just going to insert here at the end a require pry, binding.pry. And I'm working quite, yep. I literally have no idea what I'm doing for once. I really don't see what I'm doing. Help. Okay, so that was one successful addition. Record. Okay, so let's add here binding dot. So I'm just going to start up traffic server so that we can actually do something with this. Is this still visible? Okay. I have to add it to the path so the traffic line can be found. This is also important because, as you have seen in the provider, I only say traffic line. I don't say where the path is, and I have it like in the middle of nowhere. So now we can say which Puppet, and it's not found. So, okay. Now we would say Puppet resource traffic record. Oh, traffic server record. I should know how I called my own types. And where are we? We are in the type. Okay. So this is the first thing. This is where we land, or rather, it's at the end. The nice thing about pry is it's basically like a Unix command line, and you don't see this right now, but I'm typing ls, and I can see everything that is in here. And I can go into certain things and try to discover them if I'm confused about what the current state of something is. This is, this has been absolutely invaluable. Also, people on IRC. Okay, so now that we've made it this far, we're now in the type. Let's see what our object looks like. Uh-huh. Ooh. Well then. Who wants a book? Come forward.